Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday morning to you all. Hope you guys are waking up and feeling great out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your weekend. Got you some updated information on what's going to happen weather-wise for your Saturday to kickstart that weekend of yours. Hope you guys got some good plans planned for your weekend. I know for me, nothing too crazy at all. It's actually going to be a pretty relaxing weekend. It's my father-in-law's birthday. Going to go celebrate that later on today, and I already got the yard work knocked out last night. So it's a pretty chill weekend ahead. But certainly hope you guys got some cool plans. But we're here to figure out what's going to happen weather-wise as we do have a shot at some strong to severe storms across the northern portions of the country. Places like Montana, through the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe even getting into the Great Lakes region later on tonight. Do run that risk of strong to severe storms, damaging winds, large hail is probably the biggest threat, but there is a risk of tornadoes also. But we'll break down everybody else too, just like we always do, and cruise on through this video and talk about what is driving that severe weather threat for today into the next couple days, as we do run the risk of strong to severe storms not only today but tomorrow and Monday, and then we got to see what happens after that also. And then we'll briefly give you an update on the tropics, but guys, there's not much to talk about out there as things have really settled down out there. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it, and if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of other people, an opportunity to pray over it too. So let's get rocking and rolling. So this is what's going on right now across the country. We continue to get a lot of rain across the I-95 corridor, stretching from, just off the coastline of like South Carolina, just off the coast of like Myrtle Beach. If you're vacationing along the Carolina coastline all the way up to the Delmarva region, New Jersey, New York City, all the way up to the coastal regions of Maine, you're waking up to a pretty rainy start. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to rain all day. I've had a lot of questions, especially locally, is this weekend a good weekend to still plan our trip to the beach? I wouldn't cancel anything. I think that it might be a little bit more cloudy, rainy than maybe sunny. But I definitely think you'll get breaks in the activity throughout the day for sure. So we're all waking up to some unsettled weather, but I do think by the time we get into this evening, things will be much more relaxed out there. It got some energy just off the coastline of Florida, but not really affecting Florida too much. It is a pretty rainy start along the Texas coastline, some tropical moisture just kind of setting up shop there this morning. And then we do have energy sort of rounding the upper portion of this ridge, diving down from the northwest, the southeast here. So you have little impulses of energy kind of in the mid-levels that's allowing for energy at the surface in the form of showers and storms that's surging through this morning in the upper portion of the country, the upper Midwest, the Dakotas. We got this complex of storms rumbling through areas of Minnesota right now and just other areas of energy too. And it's pretty wild to see. In fact, I cannot remember to pull up my Epic Pen for the life of me before starting this video. So sorry I have to interrupt the flow like this. It's probably going to ask me to update it too. I really do probably need to update it. I think I've tried a couple times, but it just won't let me. But anyways, probably just ain't spending enough time on it. But you can actually see the flow right here on radar. You see how this moisture in the southwest is kind of going like this? And then if you go up here, this area of shower and storm activity in Canada, it's going west to east right here. And then you get right into here and it starts to dive down a little bit further south from northwest to southeast. And then by the time you get to this energy right into here, like in the Kansas and the Missouri, where you're waking up to some storm activity this morning, it starts to dive almost due south. Now there's a lighter upper flow current in the upper levels of the atmosphere down here, so the energy is moving a lot slower. But this is pivoting around upper ridging, an area of high pressure, probably centered somewhere around this area. So this is kind of maneuvering around this area. But once you get right into here, the ridging sort of spreads out, it weakens, and that is why you're going to get pretty hot again. It's already been hot, but it's, after getting a somewhat of a break across the southeast, just more typical summer type temperatures, it's getting very hot again today, especially across areas of the deep south. So that's what's going on right now as far as the radar. Let's keep this going. Watches, warnings, advisories, and there's those heat advisories returning across areas of the deep south. You might get more counties issued maybe in later updates this morning, but I do think we'll see a big time expansion of these as we're getting into our Sunday as really hot temperatures return, at least for a few days. There is some good news, and I'll probably talk about that more in an evening video I'll either do tonight or tomorrow night, as it looks like some cooler than average temperatures are going to return to the table. In fact, I'll probably pull it up on the fly right here at the end of this video, where it looks like we're going to have a little bit more of an unsettled pattern, but a cooler than average temperature-wise pattern also coming. I'm not talking about a brisk fall cold front for the south. We're not in that time of the year, but just lower daytime temperatures, probably because the introduced chance of shower and storm activity. But heat advisories in the orange, just a slew of heat advisories, even excessive heat warnings across the middle of the country here in the orange, and then the purple, that's excessive heat warnings. Excessive heat watches for areas of southeast PA, New Jersey, one county in Delaware, and heat advisories in the orange. And then the purple, excessive heat warnings out here. Red flag warnings also, so it's not only dry but hot. Hopefully we can get some of that monsoon rain activity that overspreads over some of these really dry areas. You know, Karen up here in Montana is telling me we're dealing with some nasty wildfires. Cannot speak this morning. Can't speak most mornings. You guys know that. But so hopefully, and I'm not expecting much rain up here, but hopefully we can get some rain up here eventually. So another very hot day across the lower 48 to pretty much sum all that up. The excessive rainfall outlook, you know, I'm not expecting any big risk of flooding today. That's why we only have a couple green areas, which means there's a 5% risk of flooding. So all in all, flooding, not a big deal today. Now, severe weather, that's a different story. Okay, like I mentioned, upper ridging across the western to southern portion of the country. We got flow rounding the top of it. Impulses of energy is going to lead to complexes of storms, and some of these could produce all hazards. I think the higher tornado risk is going to be shifted a little bit further east, but damaging winds, a chance for significant winds and significant hail. So we got this slight risk that's sort of strung out over eastern Montana. It kind of gets cut off, and it's mainly for more so in southern sections of North Dakota, central and northern sections of South Dakota, just about the entire state of Minnesota, and then most of Wisconsin, extending all the way down into northern Illinois, even northeastern sections of Iowa. Tornado risk with this is more so for Minnesota, but guys, this could shift in the later updates. Another update will come out in another 2 hours or so. They could broaden this. They could increase it to a 5% risk in some of these areas. So just know I'm making this video as around 6:15 a.m. Eastern time, 5:15 Central time. 5% risk of a tornado does include Minneapolis, Duluth, and the heart of Minnesota, all the way up into northern Minnesota. So be aware of that. Wind threat, pretty large. Entire yellow area, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. But folks, in this black outline region with the dashes going in between it, that's a hatch risk. So that means there's a 10% risk of winds exceeding 75 miles per hour or higher, hurricane force type winds. So please be aware of this. Now, I do think the threat of severe weather will be a little bit more isolated in the western areas of this severe weather risk today, but don't ignore it just because it's more isolated. We'll kind of zoom into this area later in the video. The hail threat, kind of the same thing as the damaging wind threat, except it's shifted a little bit further northwest. Yellow area, a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And then you got the black outline region with the dashes going in between it. That is a 10% risk of hail exceeding a 2 inch in diameter or larger. So let's be aware of all this today. Some of this could tweak, some of this could upgrade, downgrade. We just got to watch. But going on ahead and shifting to the southeast here. So all in all, just pretty hot and humid. Now, like I said, we're going to be dealing with these showers and storms along the Carolina coastline all the way up into Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, etc. And then we're just going to have our typical pop-up shower and storm activity across Florida. Not everybody's going to see it. The HRRR model likes the idea of like the Tampa Bay Clearwater area having the best chance of this today, but then this is eventually going to overspread into central Florida. Down to Fort Myers could get it. Just showers and storms dancing around across the peninsula of Florida. This is typical summer type stuff in Florida. Elsewhere, as you can see, just pop up showers and storms. These will kind of pop up and then fall apart. It's kind of like they pop up and eat up all the energy in their atmosphere. There's no real flow to move this anywhere, so they kind of pop up in one area eat up all the fuel in the atmosphere of the Cape, and then they kind of implode and then fall apart. So sometimes they pop off what we call outflow boundaries, rain-cooled boundaries that hits the warm air around the cool air. This causes lift, and this will allow for more shower and storm activity to form. I always call it like a time warp on our radar, because sometimes you'll see these outflow boundaries on radar, and you'll see just showers and storms shooting out this this boundary. And it just looks really cool on radar. That's why I recommend getting radar scope. Even in these little smaller scale setups, you can really try to figure out what's going on out there. But anyways, some pop-up activity even after these Carolina tropical downpours kind of move on out the picture. We're still going to have an opportunity for some pop-up showers and storms, really anywhere, guys, anywhere, honestly, out here. So we get into the overnight hours, wake up tomorrow morning, and it's, pretty quiet to start our Sunday morning, it looks like. But rainfall between now and the next 24 hours, and most of this is going to fall these first 12 hours out ahead of us. But we could get another inch and a quarter of rain along the extreme eastern sections of North Carolina, the Outer Banks, and could be a rainy morning to kickstart your Saturday AM across even the South Carolina coastline. So the heat is going to be pretty bad today across the immediate Gulf coastline, the deep south, the Gulf states. It stretches all the way into areas of South Carolina too. But I mean, everybody you see on here, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, all the way up to Tennessee, Atlanta, to Georgia, the entire Georgia, state of Georgia. So if we look at heat indexes, this is why you do have some heat advisories in place with the awful humidity. But, the heat index actually won't be too bad across areas of Alabama and Georgia. Actual air temperatures and the heat index might maybe only be about 3 or 4 degrees apart, and I think there's just because there's a little bit of dry air in place. But down here where there's no dry air, your heat indices will try to get all the way up to about 105 to 110. So that's why you got the heat advisories more so way down here, but still a very hot day with actual air temperatures getting very close to 100 across almost this entire area today. So be aware of that if you're out and about and not near a body of water. Not all of us are fortunate enough to have a pool in our backyard, but I'm lucky to have 2 neighbors that both have pools, so it's really cool, convenient. But anyways, the Northeast today dealing with a lot of shower and storm activity, kind of like the Carolina coastline, Virginia area, Eastern Virginia. But eventually, as we're getting into this afternoon, I think most of this will pull on off. I think this will linger around out on Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, just southeast Mass, probably through the afternoon and evening. We're going to get some more shower and storm activity. It tries to get going here in the coastal regions of Maryland, Delaware, just the Delmarva region. And then we're going to get sort of the refiring of storms are going to flow through out of Canada and really get going over Vermont, New Hampshire, and especially Maine. And, I wouldn't be surprised they upgrade this to maybe a marginal risk, but these will fly through and fly right back out very quickly. In fact, just zoom into this area. This is about midday. Well, this is about early afternoon. And then this is about the middle to late afternoon. Look at all this storm activity in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, all the way down to western Mass. Look at these bigger storms right down here near the New Hampshire, Maine line. We got some storms rumbling through the down east areas of Maine. New Brunswick could get some storm activity. These could make it all the way into Nova Scotia. And then throughout the overnight hours, we could get some more activity up near Caribou. Then we're waking up tomorrow morning to quieter conditions. But definitely be aware of some storm activity up here today for sure. The south central U.S., a pretty quiet weather day. Will continue to get a little bit of flow into the Texas coastline that will introduce the chance of showers and storms throughout the entire day. You're already getting it this morning, but you'll continue to get this down here deep in Texas, southern Texas, southeastern Texas, the coastline, a few hours inland. Look at these storms this evening. So definitely, definitely just a rainy and stormy day across the Houston area for sure. But if you live in southeast Texas, you're at least going to have a chance of showers and storms. You get further north, northwest in Texas, you probably aren't going to get a drop of rain or anything out here. But we get into the overnight hours, quieter conditions, and could be waking up tomorrow morning to a little bit of shower activity again along the Texas coastline. So All right, so this is where we'll spend the most time at, the north central U.S. I'm going to show a broad look at this first. First off, we're probably going to have to deal with this lingering energy that we're dealing with right now. If you look at the radar, you see this, and then you see this. This will continue to enter the picture into northern Minnesota most likely, or either continue to kind of trail off into southern sections of Canada. We'll have to watch this throughout the day. Well, this morning throughout the daytime hours, see if this loses some steam as it continues to kind of move southeast from the northwest. But we go back to this. It's picking up on this area of storms. I think it's a little bit further north than what it really is. But it gets this energy into northern Wisconsin and then brings some storm activity throughout the western UP. But then it reforms these storms into some nasty, like bowing structures, kind of a bowing look to these storms, and moves them through northern Wisconsin. Even hits like the Green Bay area, and then we got this nasty area of storms behind this, and these storms can mean business. This is when you can have your tornado threat here, kind of far eastern North Dakota, getting into Minnesota. You really want to watch for these storms, but this is a northwest flow type of event, guys. The short range models really struggle with this. So we're just going to go on and zoom into this area. Let's talk about the upper Midwest first, and Midwest and Great Lakes region. And then we'll move a little bit further west. I'm not going to leave you guys in the Dakotas hanging or anything like that. But here comes these storms. We got to watch for this first area. I mean, this is like 11 a.m. I'd watch out around the Minneapolis area, but these eventually will surge off into northern Wisconsin. This is around 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Some storms are possible into the extreme western sections of the UP and Michigan. All the northern counties in Wisconsin could get some storms this afternoon. Then we get into this evening. I mean, it's like 8 p.m., right? 7, 8 p.m. You see these storms trying to refire, like after the sun's beginning to set. I would say the north central counties of Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, some big storms are possible. It's like 10 p.m. Green Bay, we're right into here. Milwaukee down here. These storms look to potentially blast through the Green Bay area like at midnight tonight. Could get some storms that fire down here in northern Illinois. There could be some storms before this, guys. I wouldn't bank on this being the only storms that come through at this time of the day or night. So at the same time, you got another area of storms entering the picture. And this one can mean business, guys. If you live in Duluth down to Minneapolis, this is like 1 o'clock in the morning. Northeastern Minnesota also. These storms blast through. You got this one moving over Lake Michigan. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning. Storming pretty good in Green Bay. These eventually get into lower Michigan. If you live in like Grand Rapids, any towns and communities and western sections of the lower Michigan area could be dealing with a very, very stormy start to your Sunday morning. And then we got this other area of storms that can move over some of the same regions that gets hit like earlier in the night. And then we're waking up tomorrow morning to just a very messy start. Could have an area of storms really anywhere in this picture. I mean, they could be draped across northern Wisconsin, northern Indiana. It's very possible. Or they could look exactly like this. But, if you live in the Great Lakes region, especially south of the UP of Michigan, I'd be aware of some nasty storms that can move in overnight for sure. Don't be surprised you get woken up in the middle of the night with your dog whining, or your kid running to your bedroom scared of the lightning and thunder. Yeah, definitely going to be one of those nights across the upper Midwest, Great Lakes region. So the updraft velocity swath indicating rotation of some of these storms. I mean, it pretty much follows these two complexes of storms indicated by the HRRR model, indicating rotation. Just enough mid-level flow out there, enough flow in the atmosphere, a little bit of a spin. Going to have some rotation with these storms to promote that risk of tornadoes, especially into Minnesota, for sure. But if your area gets under a tornado warning in this complex of storms, take it serious, because I don't think you're going to get, some discrete looking tornado where you're going to see it. And, once this gets into Wisconsin, especially Michigan, this will definitely be an overnight thing. You ain't going to be able to see it. So as far as the winds, you're going to see two different areas, right? You're going to see this area right in here. You see how it kind of splotchy greens, even some yellow, some orange. This is because this is in 1 hour increments, like I mentioned many times. So this shows it 1 hour to 1 hour. It doesn't show anything in between. So, these areas in between these greens and oranges, these are getting the same type winds if this is the way it unfolds. But this is the first area of storms. You can see this, kind of dumps. It basically produces 30, 40, maybe 50 mile per hour winds. And then you see how it strengthens on the southern edge. And look at this little embedded. Now, sometimes this is overdone, but you can see how these storms strengthen here in central Wisconsin. It looks like this is producing 60, 70 mile per hour wind gusts. I don't know if this is the way this will unfold. But then you see the bigger area storms kind of blasting through areas of Minnesota, moving through Minneapolis. This eventually makes its way across the entire state of Wisconsin and then gets into Michigan. But look at this. This is like 60, 70, 80 mile per hour wind gusts being produced by these storms. I wouldn't be surprised if they upgrade areas of Minnesota, maybe even into Wisconsin, to a hatched risk. Maybe not an enhanced risk. I could see that. But a hatched risk, just introducing a risk of significant winds, because both of these areas of storms. There could just be one solid area, guys. It really depends on what this does. What is this going to do in the coming hours? What is this going to do also? So that's just a lot of little things and little features to watch. So we move west into the high plains and the Dakotas and all these areas. So this morning it's quiet. It's a little bit more straightforward out here, but this is what the models could get it wrong. For example, you see these nasty storms popping up very small here in extreme southern South Dakota, northern Nebraska. These could pack one heck of a punch. These got some storms firing around the Black Hills region. These could pack a punch, but it's really this energy kind of riding down the immediate upper portion of this ridge. The best enhanced flow is right into here. And so we just got to watch these storms. If you live up near Glasgow around 7, 8 p.m. tonight, be aware of some storms. They're not very widespread, but these could produce howling, damaging winds, very large hail, and you cannot rule out a tornado threat, even though there's not very high risk of tornadoes up here at all. But these storms will continue to surge off through the night. This is like 11 p.m., midnight. These are moving into western North Dakota. These could very well be a little bit further south than what this is being modeled. And I know that you're not seeing much on your screen, but check this out. That little area of storms, look how strong of winds this is showing up as on the HRRR model. Watch this. You'll see it pop up on your screen up here. It picks up on those storms, really increases the damaging wind threat. Look at that. This basically starts later this evening up in Montana, surges through the rest of the eastern Montana, through areas of North and South Dakota into the overnight hours. But this has the opportunity to produce 60, 70, 80 mile per hour wind gusts, folks. So please be aware if you live in this area. Some areas might not even get a drop of rain. But just be aware of not only damaging winds, guys, but very large hail, especially in the earlier life of these storms up here in Montana, like maybe as early as like late this afternoon. And really what's driving this setup is just some decent mid-level flow rounding the upper portion of this ridge. And you can see it as we're getting into this afternoon. You see the flow is better in Montana, even Wyoming. But, you're getting that 30, 40 knot mid-level flow. And when I say this mid-level flow, I'm meaning like winds going in at about 45, 50 miles per hour, about 18, 19,000 feet up in the air. But there's enough flow over here, too, into Wisconsin. You can see a little impulse of energy where you see these lines and see how they're buckling like this. That tells us that there's flow. There's energy embedded in this flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere. You can see it right here, too. You can see this little dip right up here in Canada that's about to move into Montana. You can actually see these little embedded areas of energy in the upper flow in the atmosphere. So this continues, and I really think this is why the Storm Prediction Center likes the idea of a more increased damaging wind threat in here, is because you do have some higher end kinematics fueling these storms into Montana and North Dakota, where you do have that mid-level jet pushing over 50 to 60 knots. That's winds producing that's winds like at interstate speed, 18,000 feet up in the air. So I don't really have the low-level jet pulled up. It's not really a great thing to show in these kind of setups, but there's probably little pockets of favorable low-level flow too. But you can see the energy right into here embedded in this kind of mid-level push in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And then you look, of course, at dew points and how much moisture do we have going into this flow to sort of aid in what we call the thermodynamics. Well, I know you only see dew points in the 50s in Montana. You're probably thinking, how are we going to get storms with dew points in the 50s? Well, it's not very moist. Well, people don't realize, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. This is the high plains for a reason. So you're actually really far up in the atmosphere. You're like 5, 6, maybe as much as 7,000 feet up in the air in these areas. It's a plateau. So, you know, it's different if you're like in my neck of the woods in Columbia, South Carolina, you're only sitting 300, 350 feet up. Out here, it's different. You steadily gain elevation even if you don't see mountains. So, but anyways, you don't need as much low-level moisture in these areas to produce severe weather. But you look right here, there's plenty of moisture, plenty of juice in the atmosphere. Dew points well into the 70s, very tropical. And that is definitely going to fuel these storms later on today in this area. So, the western U.S., outside of what we just talked about in the northern plains, we're going to have a decent area of monsoon rain activity across the southwestern U.S. A lot of rain activity could, you know, swirl around here from basically to like the southeast to the northwest to eventually to the north once you get a little bit further north. But definitely some rains across Nevada, California, Utah, Arizona. In fact, we'll just zoom in a little bit closer to this and check it out. By the time you get into early this afternoon, we're getting a lot of pop-up activity. I mean, this is kind of one of those days where maybe Death Valley could sneak in maybe a downpour or something. But look at all this activity up here in northwest sections of Arizona, pop-up activity. I mean, you could get some also in Colorado, New Mexico, but I would say that, you know, there's a potential for much needed rain to kind of flow through areas, the valley floors, and maybe areas of the Sierra Nevada. We need some moisture out here. I had the opportunity to get it. You know, definitely Las Vegas. You know, you guys could get some shower and storm activity. You know, I mentioned Haboobs yesterday, sandstorms, and you know, from what I've seen, I saw a couple of pictures, and it happened. I believe it was in Arizona, but you know, the National Weather Service not buying the idea of much rain. If something like the HRRR model happens, I would say that there's an opportunity for more rain than what this is showing. I'm kind of surprised by the lower amounts, but we'll see what happens. So just be aware of some rain showers across and downpours across Nevada, California, Arizona, Utah today. But temperatures nice in the northeast. You guys are always, for the most part, saved from the brunt of summer conditions, 70s and 80s. But once you get into the mid-Atlantic, you know, 80s and 90s introduced back into the picture. The southeast, 80s and 90s. You get into the deep south, 90s, maybe low 100s. Ohio Valley, 80s and 90s. Midwest, 80s and 90s. Very humid air, even though you're not super hot up here in Minnesota and surrounding states, but very humid. Air temperatures only in the 80s, though. And we look out west, very hot in the middle of the country. I mean, temperatures well into the upper 90s, low 100s across just basically the Great Plains. Very hot all the way up into Montana, maybe not as hot as the last couple days. And then across the western U.S., not quite as hot in the southwest because you are going to have the opportunity for some rain. But before the rain does fall, very hot. There's a little bit more juice in the air out here. So you're actually going to have a little bit of humidity. Anytime you have the chance of showers and storms, you got to at least have a little moist air in the atmosphere. So that'll be the case today. But very hot in these valley floors here in the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest. So it's going to be a very hot day again here in areas of Oregon, Washington, and the valley floors of Idaho. So storm chances to come tomorrow and Monday, a very similar setup. I mean, not worth diving deep into this like we have the last couple videos, but the same thing is driving tomorrow's risk. You got a ridge built over the western, southern sections of the U.S. We got flow on top of the ridge. Flow is running right over a very moist air mass. So what do? You get the overlapping of conditions that support severe weather. So that's why you have a level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather up here in North Dakota, areas of Minnesota, very small section of South Dakota, but a very large marginal risk extending from the high plains all the way into sections of the Great Lakes region. So tornado risk with this, a 2% risk. kind of more so in the marginal risk area. So we got a 2% risk of a tornado in the areas of the Midwest here. Wind threat, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And the hail threat, a little bit smaller, more so just for North Dakota. 15% risk in the yellow area of hail producing 1 inch of hail being 1 inch in diameter or larger. Then we got Monday. I'm watching maybe for a little bit more of a higher end threat, but we just kind of have to watch how this unfolds. But as of now, Milwaukee, but almost back to Minneapolis, La Crosse, south of Green Bay, Chicago, areas of Iowa. Level 2 out of 5, slight risk. We just know there's a 15% risk of severe weather within 25 miles of any given location. But the marginal risk does include all of the Great Lakes region also, and extending a little bit further back into areas of the plains. So, guys, the tropics is now quiet. No tropical cyclone activity is expected during the next 7 days. Tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days. So it's quiet. And I think it will be for another, maybe as much as 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't pick up activity until the first week of August. We're just kind of in a dead period out here, which is good news. The longer we can prolong this, the better, right? So that's all I got. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again in the next video. God bless.